Welcome to the instructions for the 2025 annual budget planner. This is an update to the current version I have out, and I'm super excited about all the changes. So we're just gonna jump right in. We're gonna start with the planning tab and choosing our starting month. This is a change I made from the last version. You can actually start in any month. If you're starting in the middle of the year, let's say for example, October, it's going to update your months in your annual income plan and your annual budgeting plan to the October start, but it's also going to update all of the dashboards. That's why this says month 1, month 2 instead of January, February. Go into month 1, and this is the first monthly dashboard. So it's going to say October. And when you go down, you'll see the next month here is November. So you can go into month 2, and that is your November dashboard. And this is the same for your debt payoff tracker. If you go down here, it's starting in October as well. This is a change from the last template, and it's the same for the net worth tracker. It also starts in October. And again, savings goal estimator, it's starting at the October timeline. And for all of your charts, it will reflect as well. But I do want to give one warning if you are starting in the middle of the year. If you're maxing out your retirement accounts and there's specific contribution limits, let's use Roth IRA for example, you're going to have to be careful. If you already invested $5,000 in your Roth IRA, and you're starting in October, make sure when you're putting money in your Roth IRA that your October through December balances don't exceed the total $7,000 you invest in your Roth IRA. Same for your 401k. If you're trying to max it at $23,000, keep in mind that this isn't one calendar year. Because of that, what I personally would recommend if you are trying to max those accounts is actually ending at December. So in this case, you wouldn't fill out January through September. You would actually just go ahead and hide this and budget through the rest of the year, keeping in mind those yearly maximums, and then create a new spreadsheet starting in January for the next year. That way you're able to start from the top of the year in your next spreadsheet. We're actually going to fill out this template for my budget, and I'm going to walk through kind of how I set up my own budget. The next thing is adding your income under the annual income plan. So I'm going to go and choose my category. Income, the first is salary, high yield savings account interest, and then I have the bonus. Bonus. I also like to do refund and the reallocations at the bottom here as just placeholders. If you don't know what those are, we'll go into it a little bit later. Starting with estimating my actual income, I always increase my 401k deductions at the beginning of the year, so I know that my income will be a little bit lower. I will put $4,000 for the first quarter of 2025, and then my usual paychecks after that are around $5,300. I'm gonna add that and pull that out. I also know I have 2 3-paycheck months. I'm gonna update those. I believe it's May and November. I'm gonna do 3 paychecks, which would make it $79.50, $79.50. That is all of my salary estimated for the year. I know I get a bonus in March. Last year was around $9,000, so we're gonna enter that. And then high yield savings account interest, I actually don't enter anything here. That way I'm never reliant on budgeting that interest because it changes. Now I do have a warning for this section. Do not enter 2 incomes of the same name. For example, if I had 2 bonuses, if you enter a bonus in the transactions, it's gonna see those 2 bonuses and calculate everything twice. If you're confused and your numbers are messing up, I would just make sure that you look if you have 2 incomes of the exact same name. You could put bonus 1, bonus 2. Just make sure they're unique. Okay, so now we're gonna go through the refund and reallocation sections. Basically, the idea is if you purchase something and you return it, you're getting money back, but that money you get back isn't income. So we wanna make sure it's not affecting our income numbers. So you'll have this line item for refund. For example, if I have $50 of refunds, I'll enter that here in the income plan. But I also need to go into transactions for January, go to refund, $50. You can enter what it's for. So you can just say Amazon return. And we'll get to this later, but you can choose the account. So once you get it entered into the transactions, you can see total income is still $4,000. So it doesn't affect your income, but you have $4,050 left to budget with. So it's basically just making sure that you can re-budget with that money, but you're not counting it as income. Next is for reallocation. So one example is if you have $3,000 in your travel sinking fund and you want to take that completely out and budget it somewhere else. In order to do that without messing up all of the numbers and have the most accurate data, you will do the same thing as the refund. So if it's a sinking fund you're taking money out of, you'll enter $3,000 here, and then you'll go in here and enter January, sinking fund, $3,000. And then you'll also enter travel, $3,000. And this is telling the budget you're taking $3,000 out of travel specifically, and then you're reallocating in your sinking funds $3,000. So it's making sure that it doesn't show that you spent $3,000 out of travel. It's just taking it out. So you'll go back to planning and you'll have an extra $3,000 to budget with, and you can put that money anywhere and it won't affect your income and it won't affect your spending. So that's basically the purpose of the reallocation. The fun part now is creating the actual budget. So we're gonna go down here, and now I'm gonna go into order of these categories. So starting with expenses, these are things that I'm spending every single month in these categories, or nearly every single month. Rent, and I'm just gonna go ahead and fill out all of my expenses. Okay, so I have all of my expenses here, and now what I'll do is enter my starting amount. And typically these will be 0 if you're just starting to budget. But if you have my last year's budget template and you've been updating it, what I like to do is go to my December dashboard in my old template and then go into my remaining column. And that remaining column is going to be the starting amount I have for my updated fresh template for the new year. And I'll pop an example of my October dashboard and what I have remaining, and I'll just use that as an example here. So rent, I have remaining 0, electric $15.88. I added a new category, personal care, because I want to figure out how much I'm spending on skincare, hair care, makeup, body care, stuff like that. So since I don't already have a category for it, we'll just enter 0. I combine all my subscriptions, so I'm just gonna add these up, 25, 11. Those are all my starting amounts. So now I'll estimate 1 month of expenses. So I know my rent is $14.12. For things that are variable, like electric, groceries, restaurants, I will use my data from my last year's spending and use the averages that I have there as a starting point for my template. So if you have my template from last year, you can see what your average spent was over the months that you tracked your spending and use that as a starting point. So I'm gonna do that now. Electric is about $140. Fund money has been an average of $230, but this also includes all of my personal care. So what I'm gonna do is just do 100, and then personal care is gonna get 150. We're just kind of guessing here. Pets, 170. It's kind of a lot. Clothes, I'm gonna leave blank and see if I have some extra later in my budget. So now that I have that, I'll take my estimates and extend it out for the entire year. And then I will move on to my debt. So these are also some fixed expenses. And again, I'm gonna extend this out. Next is my sinking funds. So sinking funds are essentially pre-saving for future expenses. For example, travel, I know I usually travel at least once a year. Car insurance and tax, I get billed every 6 months, but I like to save every month for it. So again, I'll go in my dashboard for the year before and enter all of my remaining items that I have still in these sinking funds and use that as my starting amount. Okay, so I have all of my starting amounts. So now I'm gonna enter my actual expenses first. So for example, I know I pay car insurance, so I'll add that. I know I go to the vet, so I'll add that. Home maintenance and health. I'm gonna extend that out and then move on to long-term savings. Now we're getting into financial goals. I have my emergency fund and my down payment. And then I have investments, which is my Roth IRA, my brokerage, and then my checking fund. The checking fund is the money you intentionally set aside towards the buffer in your checking account. So I always keep $3,500 as my buffer. So that's my starting amount, and I don't need to enter anything else here. Now I have all of my categories here, and I have a lot of extra rows in this template. We have, I think it's 20 extra rows. That has been something that has been asked for a lot. Wanted to give you guys some more, but I'm just gonna go ahead and hide these because I'm not using them. And we're gonna review where we're at with our budget. Now we've updated the annual budgeting plan categories. So if you wanna skip ahead to the next part, please feel free. But if you're interested in seeing how I personally budget and how I think through my budgeting, you can definitely stay tuned. I know that all of my expenses are taken care of, so I can see what I have left over for my financial goals and my other sinking funds, things like that. And right off the bat, our January and February are in the negatives. So I know I'm gonna have to do some low spends on these and make sure to go through and kind of adjust my budget and figure out where I can take this money from. So first of all, I know I can reduce my groceries. So we're gonna try $350. I can do a no restaurant challenge on these days. And also Fund money doesn't need to be there. I know I do still spend something, so I'm gonna do 50. And then my pets, I can definitely reduce this probably down to 100, which gives us 745 as a little extra buffer here. So I can probably just add that into my fund money. And that's how I kind of mess around with the numbers and make sure that my budget is working for me. Now, of course, my actual income might be different. It's just an estimate. So it's really important to make sure that you keep your numbers accurate and up to date. Now I'm gonna go through all of the other months and figure out what I wanna do here. March is my bonus time, and this is also the time that I take to fully fund most of my sinking funds. Pet emergency, I like to do $1,000 a year. Gifts, I usually do $2,000 a year. For travel, I typically do like $5,000 to $6,000 a year. We'll do $4,000, and the rest will go into my for funsies fund for like another bigger purchase. Okay, so I have my sinking funds essentially all set up. The next thing that I know that I have as a goal is saving for my Roth IRA. Go over to my goals for the year for my Roth IRA. And I know my goal is $7,500. And if you want to save for this monthly, you can add 12 months, and you know you'd have to save $625 a month, but I'm not going to do this. So I'm just going to have that as my goal. And I like to work backwards from here because I don't want this money sitting here for a long time. I just want to get it saved towards the end of the year. We're going to start in December and enter our remaining money here. Okay, so we're at 100% progress for this goal. So I know by the end of the year, if everything goes according to plan, I should have my Roth IRA saved for next year. I'm not sure if I want to do more down payment money. I'm kind of torn. So as of right now, I think what I'd prefer to do is put a little bit extra into my travel and then fill the rest into my brokerage account. And actually, I don't have anything for clothes, and I know I want some clothes. So I may do $1,000 here for clothes, and then the rest will go into the brokerage. Okay, so now everything is zeroed out. I have nothing left over to budget. I can go up here and see what percentages I'm working with. So around 42% is for expenses, 23% for my debt, 17 towards sinking funds, and around 17 for investments. And this is a take-home breakdown, so this doesn't take into account my 401k contributions or my HSA or my stock purchase contributions. This is just with my take-home money. So I have 40% of my take-home money going towards financial goals, like investment in debt. So I feel pretty good about this, especially because I do max out my 401k as well. So a couple warnings: you cannot add rows and you cannot delete rows. If you email me for help and I find that you've deleted or added rows, there's nothing I can really do to help you except tell you to create a new copy and start over. So just please be careful. And another note, this is a question I get: when you're saving money and your sinking funds and your long-term savings, the amount you put in your budgeting plan is the amount that it thinks that you saved. So if that's not an accurate number, you'll have to go back to your annual budgeting plan, to this spreadsheet, and make sure you update it to the correct number. So that's really important to make sure your numbers are accurate. Everything comes from the annual budgeting plan, and this is the source of truth. So for example, in March, I have $4,000 in travel. This is saying you saved $4,000 in March. So it's kind of set in stone here. Obviously, if I didn't do it, you just erase it and it's very easy to change. But having this number in here is saying, yes, I saved. Now, I do want to give a little heads up. You can update your annual budgeting plan. For example, if you forgot an expense and you want to add an expense in the expense section, you can do that. The only issue is Google Sheets formulas do not like copy paste. So if you want to add an expense here, I'm going to show you how to do it without messing up the formulas. You'll copy everything except the category section. So you'll copy, you'll hit right click, paste special, values only, and this is important. So it shifts everything down one. And now you'll need to manually update your categories. So this is because when you copy paste the categories, Google Sheets really hates that. So just to not mess up the formulas, go in here and update your checking fund here. Investment is this one. Down payment is long-term savings. For funsies is a sinking fund. SoFi is a debt. And then this next one is where you're putting your expense. So now you can delete this, and now you have a free spot for your expense. And you can enter forgotten. expense, just a random one. You can say whatever here. It won't mess up the other items because what the sheet is doing is it's looking for the subcategory. So it doesn't matter where in the sheet the subcategory is, as long as the names you have are exactly the same. So you couldn't say, I want to move checking fund down, but I'm going to accidentally misspell checking fund. It won't work because it doesn't know what it's looking for. Just make sure the subcategories are the exact name. Next is the paycheck deduction. So I always start with my 401k, me, and 401k match. For paycheck deductions, what I do is I update this every time I get paid. I look at my pay stub. It is optional if you don't care about your gross numbers, but if you invest a lot in your 401k and that comes out of your paycheck, it's really cool to see how much you actually invested over the year, and you would need to put that into your paycheck deduction. Something new to this template is payment accounts. So this doesn't roll up into the monthly dashboards, it just goes into transactions, but you're able to filter through by the payment accounts. So I entered all of my payment accounts. Something I like to do is split up the Zelle that I do for like random Zelles versus the Zelles that me and my partner do. And it makes splitting things so much easier. For example, he uses his Amex Blue Cash Preferred for all of our groceries, and I'll just split with him. So for all of the groceries, I'll enter my half here. So if we spent 100, I'll enter 50. And then I'll do the account as the Zelle that we have for home. At the end of the month, I'll go and filter out all of the Zelles I have for home. And I know that's how much I need to Zelle him. It's not like I have to go into Zelle every single time we do anything. I just once a month will Zelle him. I'm already tracking all of my numbers. I think this just makes it easier. But when using the transactions, you will have all of the months here, and then all of your categories for your budget planning and your income will be populating here. One thing to note is you will track all of your spending. You will also track your income. Every time you get paid, you'll go into here and enter your salary. That went into my checking account. You'll also enter when you invest. If I invest in my Roth IRA and I max it out, I'll do a $7,000 transaction, and it maybe came from my Marcus savings account. And then other than that, you'll just enter all of your transactions throughout the month. I'd like to sit down and honestly do it more than once a week, but once a week is plenty. Everything on the transactions will auto-populate into all of your monthly dashboards and your annual dashboard. And as another warning, don't track your savings. Nothing will be tracked as savings in the transactions tab. You will only enter your savings in the planning tab. But a tip I do have is if you want to just kind of note like, okay, I transferred that money there, you can do in your travel, leave the amount as 0. And then in the notes or the merchant, you can say that you transferred $500. Just for like mental tracking purposes, just leave the amount as 0 and say like you transfer that money. But if you enter an amount, it'll think that you spent it instead of saved it. So onto the annual dashboard. This got a little update from the last template. You can enter your current month. So you can see what the status is for any specific month as you go through the year. If I'm starting in January, I'll have it as January, obviously. And then once I move on to February, this is locked because there's no changes you're doing on this template, but you do need to change the month. It's okay to go ahead and change the month and say like, yeah, I know I'm editing, but just don't change or delete anything else. You're able to go through and reflect on your spending throughout the year here. You'll have a wrap up of all of your total income received so far, total expenses, saved, debt payments. One thing that is a little bit different is I have an average spent column here to see your average spent as you go through the year. And there's also a percent column. You can kind of see where you're at in the year with your spending versus what you said you were going to spend. For example, here, these are filled because there's nothing left to spend. There's also nothing planned to save. So it's like you have no more money in this bucket, but these are all empty because you haven't yet spent anything from them. But as you spend, it'll change that percent and you can see like your status. Another change is where my money went this year. You can select your gross or your take home. Your gross includes your paycheck deductions. You add your 401k, your taxes. It's going to wrap all of that up and you're going to be able to see a breakdown. And again, it'll just give you a heads up, but it's okay to change this section as long as you're only choosing one or the other. Take-home spending breakdown will be populated once you start entering transactions. And this is one I'm really excited about. You have kind of an end of year wrap up with what your highest spend month was, lowest spend month was, your highest net worth increase, debt payoff, the budget that your expenses were the most over budget versus the most under budget. And then this one will auto-populate all of your categories and you'll get a month by month breakdown. For example, rent, there's nothing populated yet, so it's all zero, but you'll be able to see the change month by month here. And then there's a lot more charts. All of the charts that were there last year will also be included in this one. They're just underneath. I'm gonna do an example month of spending for January, and then we're gonna check out the first monthly dashboard. I have an example month for January. One question I get is, I use credit cards, so how do I enter a transaction when I'm paying off my credit card? The answer there is you don't enter a transaction when you pay off your credit card. The reason you don't add paying your credit card as a transaction is you're supposed to be adding everything you put onto the credit card as a transaction already. So it would be double dipping essentially. If I'm spending on my credit card in January, I'm entering it as a January transaction. Even if my statement is due in February, this is spending I'm doing in January. So I'm using my credit card as a debit card. And every time I go into my credit card, I just go ahead and pay it off. I also get asked if you already have credit card debt. I'm going to show you of what I recommend doing. First of all, you'll have your credit card debt entered in your debt tracker. Secondly, I would add a debt category for your credit card. And that is going to be your credit card debt that you're paying off. That's not going to be any reoccurring expenses you put on the credit card. I really recommend, if you have credit card debt, to stop using the card. It makes everything more confusing and you're just racking up more interest. But if you cannot do that, what I recommend is adding your minimum payments. So let's say your minimum payment on your debt is $100. You're going to enter your credit card debt card. And you also went to restaurants on this card, and you bought coffee on this card, and you also paid your minimum balance, and you paid that from your checking account. What I would do is filter by the credit card debt. This is everything that you spent on the card that you budgeted for. So in addition to your minimum payment on your debt, this is how much went in your budget. So $346 needs to be paid in addition to your minimum payment on the card. And that is a total of $446 in payments towards your credit card. It's way easier to just stop using the credit card and only put money towards your debt on the credit card. And we'll go into our January dashboard and kind of review the month together. The first thing I'll do is actually check if my income matches up. This is very important. If this is red, that's really a red flag that you need to update your income. My actual income was $4,100, but I planned for $4,000. I need to kind of investigate why that is. And I can see I forgot to enter my high yield savings account interest into my planning. I will go into my planning tab and update the $100. And this is really important to do because this is your zero-based budget. You need to budget every single dollar, which means you need every dollar accounted for in your template. That means I have $100 left to budget, but I know I use my extra interest in my high yield savings account towards my SoFi loan. I'll increase my SoFi loan by $100. And now I'm back to a zero-based budget. We'll go back to our January dashboard and it's green. Our income is good to go. The next thing I'll look at is my month in review and see where I'm at remaining. My expenses, it looks like I'm in the green. I didn't spend more than I planned. My debt is zero, which is good. We wanna make sure that that gets to zero. Sinking funds, I saved $205 and I actually didn't spend anything. I know that this remaining section of my sinking funds is the amount of money I should have in my sinking fund account. Long-term savings, I need to go back into my long-term savings and say my emergency fund, I know I have $28,000. Now we're updated. Down payment fund is like $5,000. That looks more accurate. I have $33,000 in my high yield savings account. Investment, I didn't do anything. And checking fund, I didn't do anything here. Next, I'll look at my checking buffer to make sure that this is positive. I like to make sure it's at least above $2,500. That's kind of the threshold. If I'm overspending a lot and it gets below $2,500, I know I need to really reel it in and make sure to get my checking buffer back up. What this is I'm gonna actually show you the formula. It's adding your remaining balance in your checking fund, the remaining balance in your expenses, and your debt. If you go negative in your expenses, you spend more than you planned for, it'll reflect as a negative in your checking buffer. So it'll take away some of that checking buffer. Same for debt. If you made a debt payment and you didn't plan for it, it'll reduce your checking buffer. I never spend for my checking fund. It always is $3,500. My checking buffer is the thing that changes. If I have an unexpected expense, I'll just go negative in my categories. I won't spend out of my checking fund, but that is just totally personal preference. This checking buffer will be fluctuating as you're spending, but at the end of the month, it will be accurate. One thing I also want to note is your checking buffer doesn't necessarily equal the number in your checking account. Especially when you're starting out, it's really hard to know what exactly is extra in your checking account. So what I did was just estimate what I thought I had extra and use that as my starting amount in my checking fund. And that likely will be the case for you as well. It's hard to know what is already allocated to bills and what is extra. So just keep that in mind that your checking buffer might not necessarily equal it, but as you go through the months, you'll have a better idea. Okay, and then I'll go in and see where my take home went. 56% went towards expenses, 38% towards debt, 5% towards sinking funds. And then lastly, I'll dig into my specific categories. So right off the bat, I have a couple red items. So I spent more in my electric than I planned for, but since I had a little bit remaining in my starting amount, it's positive. So I'm actually just gonna leave that one alone. However, my restaurants is at negative $9.92, and I would actually prefer to make this positive. I have a decent buffer in my groceries. I'm gonna take $10 away from my groceries and add that into my restaurants. Now I don't have any negative categories, and I was able to use the savings I did in my groceries to pay off my restaurants. It's totally optional to do that. Sometimes I leave it negative and just make up for it the next month. And then I can see, did I stick to the plan, kind of a breakdown of each one visually. I have a transaction log at the bottom. If you're interested in just what you did in January, it's right here. I also have this. You can go into month 2. So the next month is February, and it'll bring you right to the next month. And you can go back as well. If you're in February, you want to go back to January, you just click this button. Lastly, this is a better example of the percent. This gives you kind of a running total of how much you have left to spend. So if you're keeping your budget up to date throughout the month, you can go here and see if you're on track. If it's totally full, that means that you spent all of your money and you have nothing remaining here. Groceries, I have a little bit of a sliver, so I know I have a little bit of extra money here. Restaurants, I've spent over, so I have nothing left. Coffee, I have a decent amount left. I only spent 22 out of 35. I know that I can spend a little bit extra of my monthly plan. And same with fun money and personal care. I have a little bit of extra leeway there. But the rest of these mostly are completely full. So I have nothing left to spend. That's kind of an explanation of the percent. It's just a visual cue of where you're at in your spending throughout the month. It makes it a little bit more fun to keep track of your spending throughout the month. Once I close out a month, I actually will just go down and click hide sheet. And it's really easy to get these sheets back. You'll just go into the next month and you see the button here. And on the left, it says unhide. So you can get it back. I just like to clean up the spreadsheet. I'm gonna do one more example month of spending for February, and then we're gonna check out the February dashboard. I have my example transactions for February, and if I wanted to filter these out, I would just go to month and clear and just hit February. And so now it's only my February transactions. These sometimes get messed up. So if it's not filtering correctly, what you would do is highlight all of the headings, go to data, remove filter, and then data again and create a filter. You're just recreating it and it should populate correctly after you do that. Here's the February dashboard. We'll go through this way more quickly, but I just wanted to give a couple of notes. The first is looking at the month in review, I see that I have a remaining item in my investments. What this is telling me is that I allocated money towards investments, but I didn't either track it or actually invest. What I would do is go into my planning for February and see I had $100 planned for my Roth IRA. If I know that that is just savings towards my Roth IRA, I'm good to go. I don't need to invest it because it's just saving. It's kind of like a sinking fund, but I'm just putting it in investments. But if that is supposed to be in my brokerage account and I had plans to invest that money and I didn't, I would need to go into my brokerage account and invest the $100. And once I was done with that, I need to go into transactions for February in my brokerage account and log that I invested $100. And that would be maybe coming from my checking account. One other note that I have on this dashboard is you can see here, electric, I planned $140 and I spent $144, but 140 minus 144 equals -4. So why isn't this -4? Well, all of the remaining items are rolling totals. So this takes what was remaining in the last month and it adds to the remaining for this month. And same with your starting month. So as you work through the template, it's just rolling those totals into the next month. Now there is a way around this if you prefer all of these remaining items to be 0. What I recommend is making sure your starting amounts for your expenses are 0. If you have been using my template and you have a starting amount like I have here, one option is adding this up, so 212.32, and rolling that into a sinking fund or savings, and add 212.32 maybe into my travel. So I do the $650 I started with plus all of the remaining amounts in my expenses. So that money is still allocated somewhere. It's not just like lost. It just makes sure that I'm able to start at 0 for my expenses. And then as you close out the months, you can go to your spent here, copy that, and right click, paste special, values only. And so this matches up your actual spending with your budget. So if you go back into January, all of your remaining items are 0. You can go into your planning tab and see I have an extra $87.88 to go towards something else. Now this could go into a brokerage account, all of the extra could go there. It could go into my for funsies fund. It could go into anything I want. Let's try it for February as well. Take all of your spending and your expenses, go into your annual budgeting plan for February, right click, paste special, values only. And now this one's a little different because we overspent. So we're -$14.55 and we have to take that money out of somewhere. I already invested my brokerage account and entered that as a transaction, so I can't take it out of that. But what I could do is go into maybe home maintenance. I know that I can make up for that in the next month. So I'll just reduce that to $554. You can budget a lot of different ways with my template. This is just one other option I wanted to offer. One thing I do to make budgeting easier when I'm trying to balance it out is having 2 screens open. I'll have one of them on the planning tab and one of them on my current monthly dashboard. And you can zoom them to be slightly smaller. You can also start hiding columns. I like to do this once I finish my starting amounts. I don't need to see that anymore, so I hide it. In January is already validated, closed out. We will hide that as well. This just makes it easier to edit your planning tab at the same time that you're looking at your monthly dashboard. Okay, so the next item is savings goal estimator. This one is new to this template. You'll start with entering the current year and then I'll update my month to January 2025. You have 5 different savings goals. I'm gonna do an example one. My goal amount, we're gonna say, is $35,000. Starting amount, $28,000. Monthly savings, let's say I can save $100 every month towards this goal. Then I know the estimated goal date that I will achieve this. And if you stick to your plan, you can update this as you go along. In January, you have 20% left to save. And in December, you'll have 16.9% left to save. That is just if you stick to this plan specifically. But if you want to go through the month and actually update your total saved amount, this gold section, you can rewrite these. If you plan to save $100 every month, but you get your tax refund in February, and you're like, I was able to put an extra $1,000 there, so it's $29,100. And it'll update all of the future ones accordingly, as long as you don't overwrite the other formulas. You can totally update the total saved amount each month if you want to keep track of it that way. But if you want to just use it as kind of a visual cue of, oh, it looks like if I stick to this goal, this is how much it is, it can be more passive. Like I said, you have 5 savings goals here and the chart will populate once you enter the information. Next is the debt payoff tracker. I'm so excited for these updates. So if you had the template before, I think you're gonna like these changes. Again, update the current year. So this is for 2025. We're going to switch to January 2025, and we're going to set up my debt categories. All of the blue text here is customizable. If you have a different debt category, you can enter that here. I only have a student loan, but for the sake of this example, I'm going to pretend I have credit card debt. So now I'm going to start filling out all of my debts. So debt number 1 is going to be my SoFi loan. I'm going to update it to SoFi. The category is a student loan, and the loan amount is about $25,000. Minimum payment is $750. Additional monthly payment, I do about $100, but we're going to leave it blank for now. Interest rate is 4.86. So I can see my estimated payoff date is December 2027, and my total interest paid from now until the payoff is about $1,900. This is an estimate. It's not exactly down to the penny. Now, as a note, you can play around with additional monthly payment. So if you do 100 here, you can see how that changes your payoff date and your total interest paid. You can also do a one-time extra payment, and that is in this column right here. So if you have a one-time extra payment in a certain month, let's say I use my whole bonus in March, $9,000 as an extra payment, I can see how that affects my payoff date and also my total interest paid. And another note, if you refinance your student loan, for example, don't update the interest rate on here. You can actually just update it on the specific month. So let's say in June 2025, I refinance this down to 4.2. It will change all of the future months to 4.2, and it won't affect the previous months. So those previous months will still be accurate. It'll just change what you have moving forward. However, you will change your minimum payment here if it changes. So if I refinance in June down to a $600 monthly payment, what I would recommend doing is copying your loan amounts through May, and then right-clicking and pasting values only. So now when you update your minimum payment, it's not going to affect the formulas for those loan amounts to the new minimum payment. I can do 600, and it'll only affect the future loan amounts. What I do during my monthly reset is once a month on the 1st, I will go into my loan portal and enter the exact amount that I have in my loans. That way my numbers are most accurate, and if anything changes here, it won't affect those numbers. But now I'm going to update the rest of my debts. Okay, and then I am gonna add example credit card debt. We're gonna say it's 22% interest. So it looks like it would be paid off by the end of the year, and I would pay $114 in interest. What I can do now is come up to the top and see a breakdown of my debt. Most of it here is in student loans. And I can also see total debt versus total payoff. This is showing you the breakdown of how much debt you have by the end of the year and how much total you have paid off by the end of the year. Everything goes according to plan. I will have paid off almost $15,000 worth of debt and have about $46,000 left at the end of the year. And as you move through the months, you can update the month here to the next month. So you can see a breakdown of your balance, your total payoff that month, every single month. Something I also like to do is go over here and hide all of the debts that aren't being used. Now I can see my total amount, my total starting amount, my total minimum payments, all of my extra payments, and then my average interest based off of the loan amounts, and then total interest paid for all of my debt. This will show you net payoff, total interest payment per month, and you can find all of your running totals here. I want to give a note about a mortgage. If you're adding that to your debt payoff tracker, make sure that your minimum payment is only including what's going towards the principal and interest. This number shouldn't include things like home insurance or property taxes, things that aren't actually paying off your mortgage, because that's going to skew your numbers and your payoff date and your interest paid. Just a reminder, if you do have a mortgage, don't include those in your minimum payment. That is everything for the debt payoff tracker. And we just have one more left, is the net worth tracker. This also got a revamp from last year's template, and it's the same idea. So you can update every single month to the new numbers. As you move through the month, you'll just update to the current month. All of these blue items are customizable. The only one that is not, and I want to give a warning, is investment. So do not change investment. And these 4 are the only 4 categories that are within investment. These roll up into the investment breakdown. So these are specifically only for investment. So I do want to give that warning to not make this like cash, because that wouldn't make any sense. It has to be an investment. These are specifically for investments. Investment at the top rolls up the totals for all of the other investment items. And then these 4 right here are all customizable. I don't have real estate. I'm going to hide that one. I also don't have car and I don't have other. I just have investments in cash. I'm gonna hide those as well. Now I'll go down here and enter all of my different assets. I'm gonna add my 401k, which is pre-tax investment. And let's just say in January, I had $50,000. Then next would be Roth IRA, and that is a Roth investment. Again, we'll just say $50,000. My Marcus high yield savings account is cash, and that is my sinking funds and my long-term savings. We're gonna estimate 40,000. When I do this personally, I go into all of my accounts and do it exactly. And then I have a Vanguard taxable brokerage account, and we're gonna call it 10,000. I think that's everything. I'm gonna hide the rest of the unused sections to clean this up a little bit. And I can see a net worth of 90,000. I do wanna call out the net change looks crazy, negative 150. What this is doing is it's taking February minus January to see what the change was in the month of January. For example, every month on the 1st, I will enter the most up-to-date numbers for all of my assets. For example, 51,000, 51,000, 41,000, 11,000. From January 1st to February 1st, I had a net change of $5,300. That's where that number is coming from. It thinks that you're going from January 1st to February 1st. It will be up to date once you enter the numbers for the following month. Okay, so now for the fun part, you get to see an asset breakdown and an investment breakdown. I can see 73% is in investments, 26% is in cash. And then as for my investment breakdown, I can see what is pre-tax, what is Roth, what is taxable. This is really cool to see. You can also enter your goal progress. Enter a net worth goal. I'm gonna say 100,000. And this one is a little finicky. If you double click into the number and you enter a max value, you can enter what your goal is and that will make that the max value. So I'll enter 100,000. And now I can see on the progress bar where I'm at with the goal. That looks a lot more accurate. And then coming down to here, I'll zoom in a little bit. This shows, just like the debt tracker, the total net worth change and then the total net worth. Just to show you an example, I'm gonna say this plus 1,000 every month and pull that to the end of the year. And then end of year total is basically your next year's January 1st. As like the other months, December requires the next month to have the final numbers. So end of year total is the next month. So in this case, it would be my January 1st total. As the net worth is climbing, you can also see the cumulative total of your net worth increase. So by the end of the year, having $147,000 net worth, and you know you increased your net worth total by about $63,000. And you can go here and see what your status was at any month of the year. Let's go to February. February, we're getting a little closer on the goal. And we know March surpassed that. What I would do is once I got to March and I see I already hit my goal, I would just create a new goal. So I would go in here and say, okay, 150,000. And then I would update my max number to 150,000. And now I have the new tracker. And as I go through here, I can see how that climbs. And then when you get to your end of year total, this is the final snapshot of the year's net worth. You will be able to use this annual budget planner year over year over year. I recommend creating a blank copy that stays in your Google Drive so you always have a blank available to you. So that is everything. The most time-consuming part of this template is just the initial setup. Once you have that done, all you have to do is enter your transactions throughout the month. And if you choose to, you can update your debt tracker and your net worth tracker every single month. That is optional, but if you want the most up-to-date numbers, I do recommend doing that. Thank you so much for purchasing the annual budget planner. I really hope this just helps make sense of your finances and you feel more confident moving forward.